Okay, so at this point, are there any pretrial matters from the prosecution?
Yes, Your Honor. We ask that for the purposes of the virtual trial, attorneys be allowed to screen share to present evidence before it's officially been admitted into evidence and published to the jury so that witnesses may verify its legitimacy.
You may.
Thank you. That's all.
Any pretrial issues from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor, but first, may we make introductions? We weren't able to earlier.
I apologize. I was a little confused if the prosecution had only done that or if both teams had done that. So please do that at this point.
Thank you.
So I guess good morning, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Braden Kerr, and today I will be presenting the opening statements on behalf of the defense, as well as conducting the cross-examination of Kyle Cusack and the direct examination of Taylor Perkins.
Good morning, Your Honor, opposing counsel, and members of the jury. My name is Magdalena Bratic, and today I'll be conducting the direct examination of Blake Van Owen and the cross-examination of Alex Cifuentes.
Good morning, Your Honor, opposing counsel, and members of the jury. My name is Charlotte Combe, and today I will be conducting the direct examination of Avery Becker, the cross-examination of Detective Jordan Markowitz, as well as presenting closing arguments on behalf of the defense. At this time, we ask that our witnesses be allowed to introduce themselves.
Yes, if the witnesses would please introduce themselves from the defense.
Good morning, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Jordan Ryan, and today I am Blake Van Owen.
Good morning, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Ella Walters, and today I am Taylor Perkins.
Good morning, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Olivia Longi, and today I am Avery Becker.
And we have a few preliminary matters, Your Honor. First, when an objection is sustained, would you like us to move to strike the testimony or consider it stricken?
If you want the testimony to be stricken, I would request that you specifically ask for that.
Yes, Your Honor. If at any time the court cannot hear a lawyer who is speaking, a witness who is testifying, or an exhibit being displayed, we ask the court to interrupt and stop time after around 15 seconds of this occurrence so that the problem can be resolved, and we ask this on both behalf of the prosecution and defense.
The court will make accommodations for time if there are any technical glitches.
And lastly, we ask in accordance with Tournament Rule 7.4 that both attorneys and witnesses be allowed to annotate exhibits after they have been admitted with Zoom annotation features.
That will be permitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. The defense has no further preliminary matters.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I believe that we're ready for the case to begin. So does the prosecution have an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
You're welcome to deliver that now.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel, and members of the jury. My name is Timothy Phelan, and today I will be representing the state in the trial against Avery Becker. The murder of Mackenzie Brackman is an unforgivable crime. Brackman was a charitable man who gave a significant portion of his time to mock trial and who wanted to make sure that other students would succeed in mock trial. He was revered by many as not only a good attorney, but a good coach for future attorneys, and he was loved by almost all of his students, except Avery Becker. Becker and Brackman disagreed nearly constantly, and after numerous second chances, Brackman was placed in the unfortunate position of having to remove Becker from his mock trial team, a decision that would end up costing him his life. In the face of indisputable evidence, a defense often hinges on fiction and theatrics. When evidence clearly points out the truth, theatrics offer an easy way out for those most guilty. Ladies and gentlemen, today you will see many theatrics. You will bear witness to a disgraceful attempt to undermine irrefutable evidence, and you will bear witness to the murderer of a man who spent his life fighting to protect the integrity of the courts that the defense will try to sabotage today. Today, the prosecution will call Detective Jordan Markowitz, a long-standing officer with the Denver Police Department with years of experience as a detective and countless hours of training. His investigation of cell tower records will place Becker at the scene of the crime, and his thorough analysis of the crime scene will lay out the exact story of Mr. Brackman's tragic fate. The defense will call Blake Van Owen, a former officer no longer working in law enforcement after using excessive force during an arrest. Van Owen will attempt to assert that an investigation in which she was not involved in was rushed and will ignore evidence in favor of wild speculation. The prosecution will call Alex Cifuentes, a student who can testify to Avery Becker's obvious motive. The defense will call Taylor Perkins, a close friend of Avery Becker who could not possibly present an unbiased account of the events on March 6, 2020. Perkins, the only witness presenting an alibi for the defendant, will lay out a story that, again, has no physical evidence supporting it. The prosecution will call Kyle Kuzak, another expert in this case, with years of experience in crime scene investigation, who created the official investigative report and determined that Avery Becker was the killer. Finally, the defense will call Avery Becker. Avery Becker, who had feuded with the victim for months before the crime, who had already vandalized Mackenzie Brackman's car, and who had ample motive to sabotage Brackman again, eventually killing him. Members of the jury, today you will witness a trial of facts versus fiction. You will see a case built on evidence and a case built on drama, and it will be up to you to decide if Mackenzie Brackman's killer will face justice. Thank you.
Thank you. Would the defense like to make an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor. The easy conclusion. On the day of March 6, 2020, Detective Jordan Markowitz of the Denver Police Department arrived on the scene of a grisly murder. The body, laying on the ground, dead, was that of local attorney and high school mock trial coach Mackenzie Brackman. The murder was a puzzle. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, no eyewitnesses. The only thing the police had was a video of an unidentified assailant who was covered from head to toe. They struggled to find any other conclusive evidence. So they settled on an easy conclusion, that the murderer must have been a competitor on Mr. Brackman's high school mock trial team. They decided on Avery Becker, a student at Colorado High School, who they decided must have been out for blood after getting kicked off her high school mock trial team. They dug up every piece of evidence they could possibly find. And now, members of the jury, my client Avery Becker is fighting for her life. She's been accused of burglary and murder in the first degree, which means that she knowingly entered the residence of Mackenzie Brackman with the intent to commit a crime, and in the process of committing that crime, caused the death of Mr. Brackman. Now, it's going to be the job of the prosecution in today's case to prove that Miss Becker committed these crimes beyond a reasonable doubt. However, as you will see, there are three things in today's case that prove their easy answer simply just wasn't the right one. First, you will hear that Avery Becker had a rock-solid alibi. She will tell you where she was that day, but you won't have to take her word for it. Another witness, Taylor Perkins, will back up every bit of Miss Becker's alibi. But they will both tell you they spent the entire day at the mall, never even thinking about Coach Brackman or mock trial. Second, you'll hear that the prosecution's conclusion in today's case was based on several critical errors. You'll hear that even though the police had the means to test whether screenshots of text messages Miss Becker denies sending were legitimate or just hoaxes created by her mock trial rival, Alex Cifuentes, you'll hear they never took the time You'll hear that the prosecution ignored the fact Avery Becker lost her phone the day before the murder occurred, meaning that it would have been impossible to tell where she was on that day based on the prosecution's cell phone records. But even more than that, you will hear that even the prosecution's own witnesses will testify that there was no physical evidence tying Avery Becker to the scene of the crime. No fingerprints, no DNA, no eyewitnesses, nothing. But third and finally, you'll hear that there may have been another conclusion in today's case that the police just simply didn't look into. Professor Blake Van Owens will get on the stand and tell you that there was another suspect who could have committed the crime. You'll hear that this person matched the profile of the person the police were looking for. You'll hear that this person had a personal vendetta against the victim in today's case. And members of the jury, you'll even hear that they were unaccounted for at the date and time of the murder. And we still don't know where they are. So, members of the jury, at the end of today's trial, my co-counsel Charlotte Combe will get up here and she'll ask you for a verdict. And we hope you deliver a verdict in line with the facts in today's case, and in line with the fact the prosecution went with the easy answer rather than the right one. We hope you deliver a verdict of not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you. Would the prosecution like to call their first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution calls Detective Jordan Markowitz. Good morning. Could you state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Yes, my name's Jordan Markowitz. Markowitz spelled Markowitz.
And what is your job?
Well, I'm a homicide detective with the Denver Police Department.
How long have you been working with the Denver Police Department?
That would be about 13 years now.
And how long have you been a detective?
7 years.
Have you received any special training as a detective?
Actually, yes, I have specialized training in cell phone technology.
And have you received any certification relating to that?
I have a cell phone technology and forensic data recovery certification from the American Academy of Law Enforcement.
And what did you have to do to receive that certification?
Well, I had to complete a 3-day training course, and that trained me on the types of cell phone data, how to use software like the Celebrite system, to download information from cell phones, and how to acquire and interpret cellular records.
And how often do you use this training?
Well, I've had to use it constantly as a detective. I've downloaded the contents of hundreds of cell phones at this point, and I've testified using cell tower data in over 50 cases.
At this time, I move to have Jordan Markowitz designated as an expert in the fields of cell phone technology, forensic data recovery, and homicide investigation pursuant to Rule 702.
Any objection from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor, we object under Rule 702 to specifically the homicide detective element of this, as there has not been any foundation laid for Detective Markowitz's experience or knowledge in that field or any field outside of cell phone technology and cell phone data recovery.
I'm going to overrule the objection, and he will be so qualified.
Now, let's talk about the death of Mackenzie Brackman. What was your involvement in this case?
Well, I was assigned to investigate the Brackman death on March 6th, 2020.
And what did you observe when you first arrived at the scene of the crime?
Well, the front door was open and the victim was face down on the floor in a pool of blood just inside the house. There was also a large knife on the floor just past the victim's body.
Your Honor, may I present what has been previously marked as Exhibits 1 through 6?
You may.
Can you identify these documents?
Yes, these are the pictures taken of the scene of the crime while I was there.
And how do you know what these are?
Well, I was present when they were taken and I was at the scene of the crime.
And is this a fair and accurate representation of the pictures taken?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, at this time, I move to have Exhibits 1 through 5 admitted into evidence.
Any objection from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor, in accordance with Rule 403, we object to this being more prejudicial than probative.
The objection is overruled. They will be admitted.
And may I publish these to the jury?
You may.
Now, could you describe the body, Detective?
Yes, so as you can see, the victim's shirt is soaked in blood around the upper left back and shoulder area. He had clearly been stabbed, and from the angle of the body, it looked like the victim had fallen to the ground while trying to escape the residence.
And what about the area around the body?
Well, around the area, there's a cast-off blood spatter. You can see it on the wall and ceiling near the door, and there's a large bloodied knife near the floor on the body.
And what about the rest of the crime scene?
Well, the rest of the house was in slight disarray, and the dining area had just some chair overturned and a broken plate on the floor. I found a gate to the backyard was unlatched and the back door was open.
And did you notice anything else outside of the house?
Yes, actually, I noticed a Ring doorbell camera visible in Exhibit 1. On the outside of the house, there was a Ring camera aimed at the gate at the backyard and another aimed at the back door.
And did you do any work with these Ring cameras?
I did. I was able to get access to the videos taken on March 6th.
Your Honor, may I present what has been previously marked as Exhibits 10 through 13?
You may.
Can you identify these documents?
Yes, these are the Ring videos that I obtained.
And how do you know what these are?
I was the one that obtained them from the Ring cameras.
And are these a fair and accurate representation of the videos?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, at this time I move to have Exhibits 10 through 13 admitted into evidence.
Any objection from the defense?
No objection, Your Honor.
You may.
And may I publish these to the jury?
You may.
Now, Detective Markowitz, can you clarify what's happening in this first video?
Yeah, I can. So as you can see, the first video shows a person wearing a hoodie and some type of mask. Looks like they attempt to open the front door, but it's locked.
And what about this second video?
So this video shows the person opening the gate at the side of the house.
And the third?
This one shows them entering through the unlocked back door.
And what about this final video?
The final video shows the same assailant running out the front door.
Now, after obtaining these videos, what steps did you take to continue this investigation?
Well, I downloaded the contents of the victim's phone, and I discovered a tremendous number of text messages and emails about something called mock trial. I discovered that the victim was a mock trial coach at Colorado High School, so I reached out to the students on the mock trial team.
And what information did you receive from them?
Well, the first student I called, Alex Cifuentes, told me that another student, Avery Becker, had texted Cifuentes about a plan to trash the victim's house. It turned out that Brackman had kicked Becker off the team after Becker vandalized his car.
And did you try to contact Avery Becker?
I did. I attempted to arrange an interview with Becker.
And did that interview ever occur?
No. Right before the scheduled time, I was informed by a lawyer hired by Becker's parents that they would not be going to the interview.
And how did you further your investigation into Becker?
Well, I attempted to search Becker's cell phone, but was told that Becker had lost it on March 5th, 2020, which would be the day before the murder. I did receive the phone number for Becker's phone, though, which allowed me to obtain account records and the cell tower records for the phone.
And what information did you receive from those records?
I was able to receive the information about the time, date, and which cell tower was being used for every call and text message, as long as it was sent on that phone. Typically, a phone connects to the closest cell tower, so this allowed me to determine the general location of Becker at the time of each text or call.
Your Honor, may I present what has been previously marked as Exhibits 15 and 16?
Yes.
Now, Detective Markowitz, can you identify these documents?
Yes, I can. So Exhibit 15 is a map showing just the cell towers in the area. Exhibit 16 is my expert interpretation of that data.
And how do you know what these are?
Well, I worked with the information from these cell towers throughout the case.
And are these a fair and accurate representation of the cell towers in this area?
Yes, they are.
At this time, I move to publish exhibits 15 and 16 into evidence.
Have they been entered yet?
I don't believe so. I'm requesting to admit them
Okay.
now.
Any objection to admitting these pieces of evidence from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor, in accordance with Exhibit 16, we object to hearsay, and to both exhibits, we object best evidence in 403, if I may be heard.
Yes, you may.
So in regards to Exhibit 15 and 16, these are diagrams based off of call detail records that Detective Markowitz obtained from Avery Becker's cell service provider. These aren't the original call detail records, and instead they're a diagram of them and aren't the original. So in accordance with Rule 1002, we object to best evidence. And to Rule 403, we object on the grounds of misleading the jury, because the red arcs at the top of each of the towers don't have an indication for how far they are or how much they represent on the map shown. And if I may make an offer of proof, Professor Von Owens is later going to testify that the radius of these cell towers is 6 miles. So this has the possibility of misleading the jury.
And can you articulate the hearsay objection further for the court?
Yes, Your Honor. Specifically with Exhibit 16, there is a demarcation of the path of Rock Creek Parkway between Avery Becker's home and Mackenzie Brackman's home. This is an out-of-court statement being used for the truth of the matter of the route that Avery Becker that the prosecution believes Avery Becker took the day of the murder.
And you're saying that that route was ascertained by something someone said rather than a record?
Yes, that is what Detective Markowitz believes. It's not an actual record.
With that exception, I think that the remainder of your arguments go to weight versus admissibility. So over defense objection, these two pieces of evidence will be admitted. And I believe the prosecution has already asked to publish, and now that they're admitted, they may be published to the jury.
Now, Detective, what does this cell tower information show you?
Yeah, well, if you look at the map, it appears that over the course of the afternoon, Becker's cell phone received several calls and texts from another Colorado high school student, Taylor Perkins. Becker received a text at 12:47 p.m. That went through cell tower 1227-3, which you can see covers Becker's house. Becker received another text at 12:55, which went through cell tower 1191-1. That would be consistent with Becker driving on Rock Creek Parkway, which I ascertained would be the most logical route from Becker's house to Brackman's. Becker then received 2 calls and 1 text at 1:05 p.m., 1:06 p.m., and 1:17 p.m. respectively. They went through cell tower 1197-1, and that's the antenna closest to the Brackman residence.
Now, was there anything unusual about those 2 calls?
Yes, there was. The contact with the cell tower was very short, indicating they were left unanswered. This is unsurprising, as the time of the calls, I believe Becker would have been breaking into the Brackman residence.
And finally, what did all of this evidence lead you to conclude?
Based on my observations, it seems that Avery Becker went to Mackenzie Brackman's house on Friday, March 6, 2020, intending to break in and vandalize it after being kicked off the team. Brackman was alerted to Becker's attempts to get in by the Ring doorbell and armed himself with a knife against the unknown intruder. Becker likely attempted to fight back against Brackman and ended up fatally stabbing him in the process. I doubt Becker set out to kill Brackman, but a murder during a burglary is still murder.
Thank you. No further questions.
Cross-examination from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. One moment, please. All right, Detective, you didn't really mention this in direct examination, but you interviewed Alex Cifuentes, right?
Yes, that's true.
because of a call where she told you she had some text messages.
Yes, we follow up on every lead.
Right. And you would recognize these text messages if I showed them to you, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Your Honor, permission to constructively screen share what has been previously marked as Exhibit 14.
You may.
One moment. Detective, these are the screenshots that Alex Cifuentes showed you, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
These are an accurate reflection of those screenshots.
They are.
Your Honor, at this point in time, the defense, my apologies, moves to enter Exhibit 14 into evidence.
Any objection from the prosecution?
No objection, Your Honor.
They will be admitted and you may publish to the jury.
Thank you, Your Honor. All right, Detective, I want to talk about these exhibits with you. So, just to clarify, Alex Cifuentes claims these screenshots are of a conversation they had with Avery Becker.
Yes, that's correct.
And he interviewed Alex Cifuentes at the police station.
Also correct.
You asked to see these messages on her phone.
I did. I thought they'd be helpful to the investigation.
Right. But Ms. Cifuentes didn't bring her phone to the police interview, did she?
No, I believe she'd forgotten it charging.
Right, and you thought that was odd.
Well, it's always odd that a teenager doesn't have their cell phone on them. But in a traumatic scenario, there was a murder. It makes sense that people become forgetful.
Exactly. It might have been one of the only times you'd seen a teenager without their phone on them.
That's true.
So just to clarify, you did not see any of the text messages in Exhibit 14 during that initial interview?
No, I only saw them in the screenshots that I received afterwards.
We'll get to that in a moment, but you did not see them in the initial interview, right?
No.
In fact, you never actually got to see Alex Cifuentes' phone.
No, I didn't feel it was necessary to see the actual phone. The screenshots more served as a catalyst for the rest of the investigation.
Detective, I wasn't asking what you thought was necessary. I was asking if you had ever got to see Alex Cifuentes' phone, and you didn't, right?
No, I did not.
Now, as you mentioned on direct, you have training in the Celebrite system, right?
Yes, I do.
And this, to clarify, is software used to download information off of phones, right?
Correct.
As you said, you've downloaded the content of literally hundreds of phones before.
Yes, I have.
And if you had obtained Ms. Cifuentes' phone, you would have been able to download those text messages off of it.
Yes, I suppose I would.
Detective, you simply chose to trust the screenshots that Ms. Cifuentes sent you.
I chose to trust them for the purpose of the investigation, not as the only evidence in this case.
Detective, I wasn't asking why you decided to only trust the screenshots, but you did, right?
I did.
All right. I want to talk about Avery Becker's cell phone now from the day of the murder. You don't know who was in possession of Ms. Becker's phone on March 6th, do you?
No, but it is most likely that Avery Becker was in possession of Avery Becker's cell phone.
Detective, I'm not asking what you believe or what you think is most likely. I'm asking what you know. And you don't know who was in possession of Ms. Becker's phone the day of the murder.
You cannot be 100% certain who was in possession of the phone, no.
On March 6th of 2020, all of the calls and text messages to Ms. Becker's phone were from Taylor Perkins' phone, right?
Yes, that's correct.
The calls were not answered.
Yes,
The texts were not responded to.
that's true.
Detective, Ms. Becker's lawyers told you that she lost her phone on March 5th, right?
That is what Ms. Becker's lawyers told me.
And this is a day before the murder.
Yes, as I said in my examination, it would be a day before the murder.
They told you that she was at the mall all day with Taylor Perkins.
That is what they told me.
Detective, you never checked the call detail records of Taylor Perkins.
No, I did not.
All right. I now want to talk about exhibits 15 and 16. So on direct, you talked about call detail records or CDRs, right?
Yes, I did.
And you stated that a cell phone connects with the tower that gives it the strongest connection.
Yes, generally it does.
Most of the time, that is the nearest tower.
Correct.
But if that nearest tower is busy, a cell phone will connect to a tower that is further away, right?
It's true that that is possible.
So sometimes a cell phone does not connect to the nearest tower.
Yes, but it is the minority situation.
All right, Detective, I want to talk about Exhibit 15 now. Your Honor, permission to screen share what has been previously entered as Exhibit 15?
You may.
It's not it? Okay, here we go. Detective, can you see that all right?
Yes, I can.
I want to take your attention to this middle cell tower here first that I'm circling right now in red. Do you see that?
I do.
Now let's say Avery Becker's phone is right here on Rock Creek Parkway, where I'm stamping with the X. Do you see that?
Yes, I can.
So if this cell tower is not busy, Avery Becker's phone will connect to it, right?
Yes, that's correct.
However, if this cell tower is busy, her cell phone is going to connect to a cell tower that is further away.
That would be most likely.
So her cell phone might connect to this tower.
It could.
Her cell phone might connect to this tower up here.
It could.
All right, now I want to shift gears and talk about the range of these cell towers, all right? I want to take your attention to this bottommost cell tower again that I'm circling in red. Just to clarify, Mackenzie Brackman's home is right here where I'm putting the check mark, right?
Yes, it is.
So Avery Becker's phone could have been over here and still connected to this tower, right?
Yes, it could have been. We used all three towers, and that's how we were able to discern the rough location consistent with the case.
Detective, I wasn't asking about all three towers. I was specifically asking about this bottommost one. And if Avery Becker's phone was right here where I'm putting the X mark, it still would have connected to the cell tower, right?
Yes, if you ignore all the other evidence, then yes, it's possible.
Her cell phone could have been all the way over here and still connected to the cell tower.
Yes, again, it is possible.
So these cell towers, call detail records, my apologies, don't act as a GPS.
No, I never claimed they act as a GPS.
They can't pinpoint the exact location of a phone.
No, they're simply a tool in our investigation.
So that's yes to my question, Detective?
Yes.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Redirect examination.
No redirect at this time, Your Honor.
All right. This first witness may step down. Does the prosecution have a second witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution now calls Alex Fuentes to the stand.
Thank you. And you may begin when Alex Fuentes is ready.
I'm ready, Your Honor.
Hello, Mr. Fuentes. Can you please state your full name and spell your last name for the record?
Yes, of course. Alex Fuentes, Sifuentes.
Okay, let's start off by talking about you. Could you tell us a bit about yourself?
I'm a senior at CHS, and I was on the mock trial team. I love being a part of this club because of all the stuff we do, like acting, lawyering, and all of that.
Now, let's talk about Avery. What was your relationship like with Avery Becker?
We were both in mock trial together. I feel like we were pretty good friends up until this whole situation. We pushed each other to do better, and I really think it benefited our team.
So mock trial is a competitive event. How was your team?
We were all pretty good. Like, we were called the A team for a reason. We usually competed in higher level tournaments like state. Avery and I were about the same skill level, but they tended to be noticed more because they got bigger rules as they were more showy and on the fly, but we all had a lot of fun though.
Now, let's talk about Avery's demotion. Can you describe the events that led up to Avery being demoted to the B team?
About a month before the regional tournament last year, Avery was really unprepared for practice more than usual, and Mr. Brackman got mad, so he demoted Avery to Team B.
And how did you feel about Avery's demotion?
I personally thought it was justified. When someone continues to show up late and unprepared and never seems to care about mock trial, it makes sense to demote them. The A team is for people who want to get as far as they can in the competition, and Avery wasn't going to try like the rest of us, and they didn't deserve to be there.
And now, Avery getting kicked off the team. Do you know what happened?
Yes, I was actually at the practice when it all went down. Brackman got annoyed with Avery because Avery was prepared yet again, and Avery got really mad. Avery responded by vandalizing Mr. Brackman's car, writing on it.
Objection, Your Honor. Improper character evidence more prejudicial than probative and relevance.
Response from the defense, or the prosecution rather?
Your Honor, the witness is describing an event related to the defendant and is directly related to both the defendant and the victim.
Okay, thank you. The objection will be overruled.
May I re-ask the question, Your Honor?
You may.
Okay. Do you know what happened with Avery getting kicked off the team?
Yes, I was actually at the practice when all went down. Brackman got annoyed with Avery because Avery was unprepared yet again, and Avery got mad. Avery responded by vandalizing Mr. Brackman's car, writing on it with a Sharpie and ruining his paint job. Mr. Brackman did the only reasonable thing he could do and kicked her off of the team.
And what did you think of Mr. Brackman's decision?
Well, I personally think it was completely justified. When someone vandalizes your property, are you supposed to take it like any other outburst? He didn't even press charges. And even if they think the Sharpie was a dry erase marker, the consequences should have still been the same. If you ask me, Mr. Brackman went easy on Avery. And it wasn't just this. Avery never seemed to care that much about mock trial.
Moving on. When did you next see Avery?
Avery had texted me a few times asking for help with getting back on the team. But a few days later at the Fried Shack was the first time we talked in person after this. We had gotten out of practice and the team headed over to get something to eat. I saw Avery and her friend Taylor there. I gave my condolences for her not being on the team anymore, and we talked about mock trial stuff with them, but nothing too big.
Now, I know this might be hard, but can you tell us about the day of Mr. Brackman's death?
Yes. That day he didn't show up to practice. We all decided to leave after 15 minutes because if our coach wasn't there, then why should we be? When I found out that Mr. Brackman was dead, I realized why he wasn't at practice that day. I still feel so terrible about that.
And afterwards, how did you contribute to the investigation?
Well, Avery has sent me these really suspicious texts the night before, so I wanted to show the detectives in charge of the case. I ended up forgetting my phone at home, though. It's getting really old, so the battery wasn't all that great. I'd been charging it, and I accidentally left it at home.
So how did you show the detectives the text?
The detective actually let me send him screenshots of the text after I got home. I offered to come back, but he told me that it was fine.
Your Honor, may I please show opposing counsel and the witness what has been previously admitted as Exhibit 14?
You may.
One moment, please. One moment, sorry. Um, okay, Ms. Fuentes. Can you please describe, or sorry, what did you think of this conversation?
It made me feel really awkward and actually suspicious of Avery. I had hoped Avery didn't mean it at the time, but this is evidence that Avery planned to be at Coach's house on March 6th.
And and did anything else concerning these text messages occur?
There was this private investigator for the defense who came to my house and attempted to interrogate me about them. If I thought that they were there for the truth, I would have happily complied. Getting to the truth is extremely important to me, but I know from my time in mock trial that that was not their intent.
Now, how did you react to her attempt at an interrogation?
I mean, I think I responded how most people would. I mean, I admit, I got extremely frustrated, but when she started accusing me of faking the text messages for some evil purpose, I couldn't take it anymore. My coach was dead, and I was being accused of framing someone who I considered a friend for his murder.
Lastly, what do you think of Avery Becker?
I respect Avery's skill, but I think Avery is lazy when it comes to mock trial and often lashes out when criticized. I think Avery constantly displayed their miscontempt for Mr. Brackman. It's a terrible thing to think about.
Objection, Your Honor, speculation.
And if the defense could articulate, what is the speculation here?
I believe Ms. Cifuentes testified that she thought Avery Becker had miscontempt towards Mr. Brackman, and she is not allowed to testify to the inner feelings of Ms. Becker, as she simply does not have access to them.
Okay, if the prosecution wants to rephrase the question, the prosecution may attempt to do so. The objection at this time will be sustained.
Okay, I'm going to ask Ms. Fuentes to please not speculate onto the about the feelings of Avery Becker.
Yes.
So what did you think of Avery Becker?
I respected Avery's skill, but I think Avery is lazy when it comes to mock trial and often lashes out when criticized. It's a terrible thing to think about, and I wouldn't throw out accusations if I wasn't completely sure, but I am sure Avery did this.
Objection, opinion on ultimate issue.
That objection is sustained. Any further requests from the defense?
I simply ask
No,
that
Your
the
Honor.
testimony be stricken from the record.
Okay, it will be so stricken. And is the prosecution finished with direct examination?
Yes, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you. The defense, you may begin your cross-examination.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Cifuentes, I'm just going to ask a few more clarifying questions. You and Avery Becker worked on the same mock trial team.
Yeah.
You thought Avery's behavior left the team in a state of anxiety.
Yeah.
You thought that she had a lackadaisical attitude.
Yes.
You thought that she refused to work hard.
Yes.
In your eyes, Avery was successful just because she had good looks and got lucky.
Mm-hmm.
You don't think Avery won any awards because of any real talent?
No.
But Ms.
Objection to
Cifuentes,
relevance.
Would the defense like to respond to relevance?
yes, Your Honor, the defense is asking Ms. Cifuentes about her relationship with Avery Becker to show that she could have harbored jealousy or envy towards Ms. Becker, which could have led her to go and frame the text messages that she sent that she received from Miss Becker, or that she could have, or that she's testifying because she had been envious of Miss Becker.
The objection at this time will be overruled. You may continue.
Let me re-ask my question, Ms. Cifuentes. You worked hard on all of your mock trial material.
Yes, extremely.
You began your drafts, your crosses, your opening statements whenever Mr. Brackman asked you to.
Yes, of course.
You revised your drafts and examinations over and over.
Yep.
Until they were perfect.
Yes, of course.
You spent considerable amounts of time memorizing the rules of evidence.
Yes.
You practiced your statements in front of your family.
Objection to asked and answered.
Overruled at this time. The defense may continue.
Let me re-ask my question. You'd always practice your statements in front of your family.
Yes.
You worked so hard that it irked you whenever Avery made up things on the fly.
Yes, as I feel like it would for anyone.
But just to be clear, it irked you.
Yes.
It was a slap in the face whenever people that didn't work hard won awards.
Yes, I feel like that's quite obvious.
When Avery was kicked off from the team, you thought it was for the best.
Yes.
With Avery gone, you were excited for the larger role you were going to get.
Yes.
Now, as you testified, Avery was kicked off the mock trial team.
Yes.
You saw Avery after she had gotten kicked off.
Mm-hmm.
Just to be clear, you saw her at the Fry Shack.
Yes.
You two talked for a bit.
Yes, like I said in my testament.
Exactly. You even got to play a game on Avery's phone before she left with Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
Now, right after Avery had gotten kicked off, you say that she had sent you texts.
Yes.
You say that she had texted you that she had planned to go to Mr. Brackman's house.
Yes.
To vandalize it.
Mm-hmm.
After the murder of your coach, you got a call.
Yes.
It was from a police detective.
Yes.
You told the detective about the texts.
Yes.
It was decided you'd do an interview.
Yes.
You left your phone at home.
Yes, I feel like no one's perfect and we always forget stuff sometimes.
Exactly. You forgot your phone, so you didn't bring it to the interview.
No, but I offered to bring it back.
You offered to bring it back, but the police detective said the screenshots would be sufficient.
Yes, and that's not my place to determine if they're... Yeah.
You don't own that phone anymore.
No, it broke.
You have no idea where it is.
Nope, just like I just said.
Thank you, Ms. Cifuentes. No further questions.
Redirect from the prosecution.
Yes, Your Honor, briefly. Now, can you please describe why you didn't bring your phone to the interview?
You know, I was just in a rush, and after someone, you know, you find out about a murder of your coach, you're going to be really out of it. It's just a lot. And my phone, I have a really bad phone battery, so I left it charging, and I offered to bring it back, but I didn't need to.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Are there any further witnesses from the prosecution?
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution calls Kyle Kuzak to the stand.
Okay, and once your third witness is ready, you may begin.
I'm ready.
Could you state your name and spell your last for the record?
Kyle Kuzak. That's Kyle, K-U-Z-A-K.
Now, how long have you been involved in crime scene reconstruction?
19 years now.
And perfect. Do you hold any certifications or training in the realm of crime scene reconstruction?
Yeah, I'm certified by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation as a crime scene reconstructive investigator. I've gone to many crime scene reconstruction conferences.
And what is your current role?
I've spent the past 3 years as a civilian employee of the Denver Police Department.
What sorts of techniques do you use in your investigations? Sorry, I couldn't get that. Did anyone else get that? No?
No. Is your witness having technical difficulties?
I'd assume so, if we could pause time.
We may. If you want to inquire of your witness and see.
Yeah, Mr. Kuzak, could you try that again?
And you can text or call this witness if they want to log in and log out. This won't be held against your time. So if the timekeepers could take note of that.
Perfect. Mr. Kuzak, could you say something to make sure we can hear you?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. Where did we leave off?
Okay. Your Honor, I'd ask to resume questioning.
You may, and time may resume at this point.
Perfect. What sorts of techniques do you use in your investigations?
I utilize a 5-step process that includes recognition, documentation, collection, and evaluation of evidence.
Your Honor, at this time, I move to have Kyle Kuzak designated as an expert in the field of crime scene reconstruction pursuant to Rule 702.
Any objection from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. Under Rule 702, the prosecution must show what evidence this witness used to come to their conclusion in order to have them admitted as an expert witness.
Okay, at this point, the people or the court will overrule the defense objection and this witness will be qualified as an expert.
Investigator Kuzak, were you called to the scene of Brackman's murder?
Yes.
Please outline the ways you ensure a thorough investigation when reconstructing a crime scene such as this one.
I apply 2 key principles to every case I'm involved in. First of all, I assume every case is going to trial, and I document all evidence. Together, these principles guide me to conduct a thorough, comprehensive investigation and to document all our evidence with the mindset of further reconstruction.
And could you walk us through what, in your expert opinion, you believe to have happened on the evening of March 6, 2020?
During the afternoon in question, an individual matching the height and build of the defendant was recorded by a series of cameras, first approaching the front door, then entering the victim's residence through the back door.
And what do you believe the victim did before the intruder entered the home?
The evidence suggests that upon being alerted to the intrusion by either a notification from the Ring doorbell system or by the opening of the back door, the victim armed himself with a drawer containing several small knives was found open, and a nearby knife block was found with one large chef's knife missing.
And once the intruder was inside the house, what do you believe to have occurred?
The evidence points towards a struggle between the victim and the intruder shortly after the intruder entered the house. Scuff marks on the kitchen floor near the back door indicate that the 2 individuals engaged in close contact. A broken plate, which was found just 5 feet away from the back door, suggests that this struggle moved towards the kitchen table. At this point, I believe that the intruder was able to disarm the victim and obtain the chef's knife.
And based on your comprehensive investigation, where do you believe the stabbing to have occurred?
The crime scene photographs that I have meticulously organized showed a series of small blood droplets that began near the kitchen table and lead towards the front door, where a large pool of blood was found. The autopsy report established that the victim was stabbed only once, but that the tip of the blade nicked the lower arch of the victim's aorta. This wound could have led to severe internal bleeding and bleeding out once the victim removed the knife, creating the pool of blood that was seen in the crime scene photographs. The crime scene photographs, along with the location and position of the knife in the victim's body, as described in the autopsy report, lead me to believe that the victim was stabbed in very close proximity to the intruder and while being restrained. The intruder likely reached over and stabbed the victim in the upper back and shoulder area.
And these crime scene photographs that you mentioned that show the blood droplets, they were corrupted. How did you conduct this investigation with corrupted image files?
The corruption took place well after I reviewed the photographs, and I had no problem accessing them for my analysis.
Fantastic. Are you familiar with the defense's witness, Blake Van Owens?
Yes.
Van Owens claims in his report that the intruder stabbed the victim while the victim was sitting at the kitchen table. What is your expert opinion on these claims?
First of all, either the Ring doorbell system or the 2 security cameras around the victim's home would have notified the victim. Even if the victim didn't notice this, the victim would certainly have noticed when the back door opened and someone began walking across the kitchen. Finally, if after all of that the victim was still standing down, the intruder would have to have held the knife backwards from just about the way everyone would hold it, and stand almost directly above the victim while administering the fatal blow. Van Owens' claims don't account for the scuff marks near the door, the broken plate, or the empty slot in the knife block.
And what is your expert opinion on Blake Van Owens' crime scene reconstruction techniques?
Van Owens is a police officer, but he has no crime scene reconstruction experience. I knew him from some conferences, but he only reviews the work of other crime scene reconstructions, mostly by reading their reports. Reading a report will never provide an investigator with the same amount of information as actually being at the crime scene.
And based on your exhaustive investigation and your expertise in crime scene reconstruction.
In lawyer testimony, he used the adjective exhaustive. I believe that's for the jury to decide.
Sustained. If you could rephrase your question.
Absolutely. What is your final conclusion based on this reconstruction?
Well, a thoughtful reconstruction of this case reveals that the victim was surprised by the intruder and engaged in a significant struggle before being killed by the very same knife that he used to defend himself.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Cross-examination from the defense.
Yes, Your Honor. So, Mr. Cusack, what pronouns would you prefer me use?
I would prefer he, him. Thank you for asking.
Yes. Okay. So, Mr. Cusack, let's start by talking about your theory in today's case. Your theory, as you just described, was that the intruder broke in, notified the defendant, or notified the victim, and then some kind of struggle occurred.
That is correct.
And in that struggle, the victim was stabbed after the perpetrator somehow disarmed them and grabbed the knife, correct?
That is correct.
But you would agree with me that it is possible the person who went to Mr. Brackman's house intended to commit a murder.
While it's possible, I don't feel that it is likely.
So I guess let's talk about that. First, you mentioned on your direct there were scuff marks found near the back door.
That is correct.
And you said these indicated to you that some kind of struggle occurred.
That is correct.
But you don't know when those scuff marks were made, do you?
No, but how often are people skidding around our kitchen, if not in a struggle?
I wasn't really asking about how often it happens, but you don't know when those were made, do you?
That is correct.
They could have been made a week before this incident occurred.
As I said, yes, that is correct.
Could have been made a month before this incident occurred.
My answer is still the same. That is correct.
So these scuff marks could have even been made a year before this incident occurred.
Yes, but it's most likely that they were created during this incident.
But they could have been created an entire year before this incident occurred, correct?
That is correct.
So next, let's talk a little bit about the actual person who committed this crime. Now, you saw Exhibit 12 played earlier, just as clear as everybody else did, correct?
That is correct.
And you saw the person in that video.
That is correct.
Now, this person was completely covered. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
You couldn't really see their eye color,
That is true.
can't really see their hair color,
Yes,
can't see this person's racial background.
that is true, yes.
You can't even really see what this person's gender is, can you?
That's true, but the height and build do match that of the defendant.
But you can't even give an exact height that this person is, can you?
That is correct.
So let's move on to talk a little bit about the actual physical evidence discovered in today's case. Now, you went to the crime scene.
That is true.
You reviewed all of the witness statements in today's case.
That is correct.
You reviewed all the exhibits.
Yes.
And you would agree with me that there was no physical evidence found that ties Avery Becker to the scene of the crime.
That is correct, but that happens quite frequently in cases like this.
So let's break this down a little bit. Now, you saw earlier in those video exhibits that the intruder touched the back door of the Brackman residence, correct?
While wearing gloves.
Exactly. They were wearing gloves. So you didn't find any fingerprints on the back door?
Mm-hmm.
You didn't find any of Avery Becker's DNA on the back door?
The defendant was likely well prepared for a burglary, although the murder was likely accidental.
I'm not asking who this person was. I'm asking whether you found any of their DNA on this surface. And you didn't, did you?
No.
You also were able to review the murder weapon.
That is correct.
No fingerprints of Avery Becker were found on the murder weapon, were they?
No. But
No
they were
DNA
also...
of Avery Becker was found on the murder weapon.
No.
And apart from all of this, there were no eyewitnesses that could say Avery Becker was at the scene of the crime, were there?
No, there are not.
Thank you. No further questions.
Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Investigator Kuzak, were you able to come to a definitive conclusion based on the evidence you found in this case?
A definitive conclusion being?
Do you feel confident in your reconstruction of this case based on the evidence available?
Yes, I do.
And is it expected that in a case like this, the scene may lack all evidence necessary to prove without 100% certainty of any particular occurrence?
Yes, that's correct. Scenes never have as much evidence as one could hope for.
Could you repeat that answer, please? Could you repeat that answer, please?
Yes, that is correct. Scenes never have as much evidence as one could hope for.
Okay, and finally, the lack of DNA or fingerprint evidence didn't impact your conclusions in this case, did they?
No, it did not.
No further questions.
Thank you. And there will be no time demerit because I understand we had some technical difficulties with those last few questions. Any further witnesses from the prosecution?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Does the prosecution rest?
The prosecution rests.
At this time, are there any motions to take up from either the prosecution or the defense? I'll ask the prosecution first. Is that a yes or a no?
No, Your Honor.
Any motions to take up from the defense?
The defense would like to call Blake Van Owen to the stand.
Okay. So first, I take that as there are no motions at this time from the defense, and the defense is ready to present a case. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. And the defense may call their first witness. So once your witness is ready, you may begin questioning.
Ms. Van Owen, are you ready?
I am.
Good morning. Could you please introduce yourself to the court?
Good morning. My name is Blake Van Owen.
What do you do for a living, Ms. Van Owen?
I'm a private investigator as well as a teacher down at CU Denver.
Do you have any experience in police investigation?
I do. I actually started out my career over at the Aurora Police Department.
What education do you have?
I have a master's degree in criminal justice from Ashford University.
What does a typical case consultation look like for you?
Well, typically when I'm hired as a consultant, my job is to review the work done by the police. I look at their procedure, their gathering of evidence, their analysis of the evidence, and their total conclusions.
How many cases have you consulted in on?
Oh my, it's over 100 by now. It's quite a few.
Have you testified in court before as an expert witness?
I have. I've been tendered all across the Western United States.
What areas do you testify in?
Commonly, I testify in crime scene reconstruction, which I've done 8 times, as well as cell tower analysis, which I've done 5 times, and finally, general police investigation, which I've done 12 times.
Did you do anything in preparation for today's case?
I did. I actually reviewed the exhibits put together by Detective Markowitz and Kyle Kuzak, and I actually conducted my own partial investigation for today.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense would like to tender Ms. Van Owen as an expert in crime scene reconstruction, police procedure, and cell tower analysis.
Any objection from the prosecution?
No objection, Your Honor.
This witness will be tendered as an expert as such.
Now, Ms. Van Owen, overall, what are your conclusions on the police's conduct in today's case?
I concluded that the police ran an incomplete and rather haphazard investigation that led them to an over-reliance on call detail records, as well as the failure to investigate key pieces of evidence in person, and finally, a failure to investigate every possible suspect.
Let's take those apart one by one. First, could you tell the jury how the police department over-relied on the cell phone records?
Well, yes, of course. The key thing to remember with these call detail records is that they're not the same as a GPS. They don't pinpoint a location. They give a range of possible locations. And that CDRs track where a phone is, not where a phone's user is.
How often do phones connect to the closest tower?
It depends on the area. So if you're in a rural area, or it's my part, if you're in an urban area and the tower closest to you is busy, it's pretty likely actually that your phone might connect to a tower that's further away, because a further away tower might actually give you a better signal.
And approximately what is the range of cell phone in an urban area can connect to a tower that's further away?
Typically, cell phone towers have a radius of about 6 to 7 miles. It's pretty expansive.
What can the call detail records tell us about the location of Avery Becker's phone?
Well, if we look at the call detail records, Tower 1191, antennas 2 and 3, showed Taylor Perkins sent several calls and texts on March 6th at the exact same time that Avery Becker's phone received calls and texts, which tracks with the idea that Avery Becker and Taylor Perkins were looking for Avery Becker's phone.
You've told us about the cell phone records. Now I'd like to go to the police's handling of the evidence in today's case. What pieces of evidence did the police mishandle?
Well, primarily, they never actually got Alex Cifuentes' phone in front of them to look at it or authenticate the text messages she claimed that Avery Becker sent.
Why weren't they able to authenticate Alex Cifuentes' text messages?
Well, the police relied upon screenshots, which, I mean, could be very easily falsified or doctored.
Even if the police had Ms. Cifuentes' phone in front of them, could they have authenticated the texts?
Yes, absolutely. If the police had had that phone in front of them, they could have used a special technology called Celebrate. And what that allows them to do is download the contents of a phone and then look through it and see if something is real or not to authenticate things that they're looking at.
Just to be clear, did the police do that in today's investigation?
No.
Finally, you mentioned that the police did not investigate any alternate suspects. During your partial investigation, why did you conclude that there could have been another suspect?
Well, I actually came across someone who had a very strong motive for committing these crimes, whose name is Blair Rollins.
What possible motive could Blair Rollins have had?
Well, Blair Rollins' father, Jonathan Rollins, had been a former client of Mackenzie Brackman. Mackenzie Brackman was supposed to defend Jonathan Rollins in court, as Jonathan had been put on trial for murder.
Was Blair Rollins present for his father's trial?
Indeed, Blair Rollins actually testified on his father's behalf in that very trial.
Did you end up investigating the trial?
Of course, I was able to use several audio recordings from the trial to investigate it.
Are you familiar with Exhibit 22?
I am, of course.
Could you tell the jury what it is?
It's a short audio clip of something that Jonathan Rollins yelled at the end of his trial and sentencing.
Is it a fair and accurate representation of the trial?
It is.
Is it authentic?
It is.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense would like to admit Exhibit 22 into evidence.
Any objection from the people?
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution objects to hearsay.
Okay, and what's the defense response?
Your Honor, I have two responses to this objection. The first is that we're not showing this for the truth of the matter, that Jonathan Rollins intended to kill Mackenzie Brackman. We're showing its effect on the listener, Blair Rollins.
And did you say you had a second response as well?
Yes, this exhibit also falls under the hearsay exception 8033, statement of a plan.
Okay. At this time, the court will overrule the prosecution's objection and you may admit this piece of evidence.
Now, Ms. Van Owen, I'm going to play Exhibit 22 for you. Please let me know if you can't hear it.
I'll get you back, Brackman, if it's the last thing I do.
Ms. Van Owen, were you able to hear that recording?
I was.
Could you tell the jury what we just heard?
Well, Jonathan Rollins threatened revenge on Mackenzie Brackman.
Could Blair Rollins have heard his father's remarks?
Most certainly.
Throughout your partial investigation, did you find any other similarities between Blair Rollins and the killer?
I did. I actually was able to find out that Blair Rollins is the exact same size and build as Miss Becker.
Did you make any conclusions about the whereabouts of Blair Rollins on the day Mackenzie Brackman was killed?
I did. I was able to find out that Blair Rollins was very noticeably absent from school that day.
Ms. Van Owen, did the police department investigate Blair Rollins?
They did not.
Did they investigate any other alternate suspects?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Overall, Ms. Van Owen, what did you conclude about the police's conduct in today's case?
I concluded that the police made several errors in their case that took them down a path that the case never should have gone down. The police came to an easy conclusion early on, but I don't think it was the right one.
Thank you. No further questions.
Cross-examination from the people?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Van Owen, it's fair to say that you've had a long history with law enforcement and police work, correct?
Yes, that's true.
In fact, you used to be a member of the Aurora Police Department?
I did.
And you left the department after injuring somebody during an arrest?
Yes, that's correct.
And
Objection,
since
Your
then,
Honor. More prejudicial than probative and relevance.
I think that her biases, motives, and credentials are relevant, so at this time, the court will overrule that objection. People may proceed.
and since that incident, you became disillusioned with police work?
I did. Some of the tactics that they were using, I couldn't stomach. So I set out to do differently, to do better.
You've stated that you disagree with many police department policies at a visceral level.
Some of them are not the best.
And you've testified quite a few times in court, correct?
I have.
And every time you've testified on the side of the defense?
Yes, they tend to be the one who are in need of my services.
In fact, you've said you consider yourself a check of power on the police?
That's correct.
So you seem somewhat predisposed against the police department.
No, that's actually incorrect. I am hired to look at the investigation the police have run. If they've done a good job, if they've followed all the steps they needed to, then I by all means support the conclusion. However, in this case, that's just not what we've seen.
This is not your first time encountering Kalakuzak, correct?
It is not.
You've said that you believe he's a little egotistical.
A little bit, yes.
And this is also not your first time dealing with Detective Markowitz, correct?
That's correct.
So you seem to have a somewhat tumultuous past with everybody involved with the police investigation.
I wouldn't classify it as tumultuous, no. I'm just trying to seek justice the way that they are. Sometimes we just disagree about how that's accomplished.
You disagree frequently.
It tends to be that way, unfortunately.
And you have not been to the crime scene, correct?
It was unnecessary in this case, so no.
Your argument is based largely on evidence collected by Detective Markowitz and Kyle Kuzak?
Yes, that's how my consulting works.
And yet you claim to know what occurred at the crime scene better than the two investigators who were at the scene of the crime?
I certainly came to a very different conclusion as I spotted a couple of errors that they made.
And you've presented different possible culprits and motives that may have led to the death of Mr. Brackman, correct?
That's correct.
But you're not completely certain that any one of them actually occurred.
I'm not certain that they necessarily occurred, but I'm certain that they weren't investigated, which is the big point here.
And your most prominent theory accuses Blair Rollins, another Colorado high school student, correct?
That's correct.
Yet you have no evidence that Rollins was ever present at the crime scene?
My job counsel in this case wasn't to prove who did it. It was to look at if Miss Becker did it. I'm simply presenting some other options that I think the police didn't do. But to answer your question, no.
You still accused Blair Rollins of murder, though, despite the lack of physical evidence suggesting their involvement?
I'm just simply pointing out that there were several key pieces of evidence, suspects even, that weren't investigated.
Thank you. No further questions.
Redirect from the defense.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Van Owen, does the fact that you left the Aurora Police Department change any of your conclusions in today's case?
Absolutely not.
And is it your burden today to prove that Blair Rollins killed Mackenzie Brackman?
It is not.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. This witness may step down. If the defense would like to call their second witness, you may do so now and proceed with questioning once that witness is ready.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Taylor Perkins to the stand.
Hi.
Are you ready for us to proceed?
I am.
So, Ms. Perkins, could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Well, hi. My name is Taylor Perkins.
And what do you do for a living, Ms. Perkins?
Well, I'm currently a freshman at CU. I'm a theater major.
So you're a freshman.
I am.
What did you do before going to CU?
Well, I was a senior at Colorado High School.
Do you know the defendant in today's case, Avery Becker?
I do. She's my best friend.
So just right off the bat, do you know whether Avery Becker murdered Mackenzie Brackman?
I do.
How?
Well, I was with her the whole day.
So let's back up a little bit. What was your relationship with Avery Becker like?
Really good. We did lots of fun activities together. We did school, obviously, musical theater for a while, mock trial, Keys Club, just kind of fun school activities.
So could you explain to the jury what this mock trial activity is?
Of course. So it's really similar to musical theater, just without the like dancing and then the singing. Although there was that one time, but usually there's not singing.
So what was the relationship with Avery Becker and Mackenzie Brackman like?
Tense is probably the best way to say it.
Objection, speculation.
The prosecution like to respond?
Your Honor, did you mean the defense respond?
I'm sorry, the defense, would you like to respond?
Yes, Your Honor. This is not speculation, as this is rationally based on the witness's perception.
Okay. The court will overrule the prosecution's objection.
So, Ms. Perkins, would you like me to re-ask the question?
Yes, please.
So, what was Avery Becker and Mackenzie Brackman's relationship like?
It's probably the best way to put it is tense.
And could you explain why that is?
Well, Avery was usually a little bit unprepared when she came to practice. I mean, she was still amazing, by far the best on the team. But I guess it was just something that really irked Coach Brackman.
So, did anything ever come of this?
Yeah, about a month before regionals, she came in really unprepared, and it was actually, I guess, relatively obvious. And I guess that was just the final straw, and he demoted her to B team.
So, what did you decide to do?
Well, quite frankly, I didn't love mock trial. The whole reason I was on it was because of Avery, and I had musical theater and other stuff going on in my life, so I quit in solidarity.
So, what happened to Avery after you left mock trial?
Well, shortly after, she was kicked off.
So, did you still hang out with Avery after she was kicked off?
Absolutely. I mean, I wasn't going to stop being friends with my best friend because of some stupid club.
So, when was the last time you hung out with her before the murder?
Probably the day before the 5th.
What were you two doing that day?
Well, she came over to my house and we had some food and played games on our phone. And then we were hungry again, so we went to the Fry Shack.
What's the Fry Shack?
Well, it's this really popular restaurant near Colorado High School. They have really good fries. I mean, obviously. I guess it's just a really popular place for mock trial kids to hang out.
So, what happened when you went there?
Well, when we went there, we saw a bunch of kids from mock trial. They were all saying how sorry they were that Avery was kicked off.
And did anything happen?
I think Avery got a little bit, I guess, frustrated, and she went to the bathroom.
Did she leave anything behind?
I think she left her phone.
Objection. Yeah. Question could be considered leading.
Overruled.
Ms. Perkins, would you like me to re-ask the question?
Yes, please.
Did she leave anything behind when she went to the bathroom?
Yeah, she left her phone.
So what happened after Avery Becker stormed off?
Objection. This question calls for narrative.
The court will overrule that objection. You may continue.
So,
sorry.
Perkins, would you like me to re-ask the question?
Yes, please.
So what happened after Avery Becker stormed off?
Well, after she went to the bathroom, I talked to Alex a little bit, and then Avery came back, and we were kind of done with the fry shack, so we went to the mall.
And did you ever see if Avery picked up her phone?
I didn't. I guess I just assumed that she had.
So let's talk about the next day, the day of the murder. What happened on that day?
Well, Avery usually picks me up and like drops me off from school. And I was texting her to find out where she was, and she wasn't responding.
Did you ever find out why she wasn't responding?
Yeah, she told me that she had lost her phone.
So what did you two decide to do?
We didn't have that much going on in school. Tech week was the next week, so we didn't have that. And we didn't really have we'd taken our lit quiz earlier in the week. So we decided to go look for her phone. We just completely retraced our steps from the day before the 5th.
So just to make it clear for the jury, she picked you up in the morning, correct?
She did, yeah.
So what did you guys do when you went to the mall?
Well, we were looking for her phone everywhere. I was calling it and texting it, and it was just we couldn't find it.
So were you with Avery Becker that whole day?
I was, yeah.
Did she ever leave your side?
Not at all, no.
So did Avery Becker murder Mackenzie Brackman?
Absolutely not.
Objection. This question calls for a lay opinion.
Response from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. Under Rule 704, under Rule 704, an opinion on the ultimate issue is not automatically objectionable unless it is an expert testifying to the mental state or condition of someone to decide whether they did or didn't commit a crime.
Okay, the objection will be overruled. If you would like to re-ask the question.
So, Ms. Perkins, did Avery Becker murder Mackenzie Brackman?
Absolutely not, no.
And are you sure about this?
100% yes.
Thank you. No further questions.
And is there cross-examination from the people?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Hello, Ms. Perkins. I'm going to ask you a few questions. To start off, your relationship with Avery Becker. You were best friends with Avery Becker, correct?
I was, yeah.
And you didn't have a very high opinion of Mr. Brackman, did you?
I thought he could make some questionable decisions for the team.
And your opinions about Avery often differed from Mr. Brackman's?
Yeah, they did. I thought she was amazing, and I guess he didn't.
And you say that Avery and Brackman had a rocky relationship, correct?
I would say that, yeah.
And Avery was often rash, yes?
She could be rash at times, yeah.
And Avery has acted out verbally before.
She has, but she was still an amazing person and an even more amazing lawyer.
Avery regularly showed up to practice unprepared, yes?
She could, but she was such an amazing lawyer that you could barely notice at times.
But this being unprepared is the reason why Avery got demoted in the first place.
Yeah, I guess it upset Coach Brackman.
Now, Avery was demoted to the B team before being kicked out of the club completely.
She was, yeah.
And you disagreed with this decision, isn't that right?
Of course I did. I mean, I didn't think that the A team would make it to state without her. She was just so good. She was that good.
So you quit mock trial so that Avery could get back on the A team.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to be on mock trial without my best friend.
But you still would have been in the club with her, just not on the same team.
I suppose so, yeah, but I didn't really like mock trial that much, and I don't know, I guess I wanted to pursue other activities.
And you quitting was why you weren't at the practice that caused Avery to vandalize Mr. Brackman's car.
It was, yeah.
Meaning you only heard about these events through Avery, correct?
I did.
And You claim that Avery just needed to blow off steam with this extreme outburst?
Yeah, I do.
Moving on. You weren't a big fan of Alex Cifuentes, were you?
I suppose you could say I wasn't her biggest fan.
You stated that you wanted to punch Alex in the face when they sympathized with Avery.
Well, I thought she had a way of being passive-aggressively insincere, and she was being that at the Fry Shack, I thought, and I didn't like seeing my best friend hurt.
So even though they were technically being polite, you didn't like them still?
Well, as I said, I thought she was being passive-aggressive.
Objection, lawyer testifying. She asserted that that Cifuentes was being polite. I think that's making an assertion that's up for the jury to decide.
Sustained the prosecution, you can rephrase your question.
Thank you, Your Honor. So you didn't like Alex Cifuentes, even when they went out of their way to talk to you?
Objection, Your Honor. Once again, this language went out of their way. I think that's up for the jury to decide.
I'm going to overrule that objection as this is cross-examination, so the witness may answer that question.
Would you like me to re-ask the question?
Yes, please.
Okay, so you didn't like Alex Cifuentes, even when they went out of their way to talk to you and Avery?
I guess I just wasn't her biggest fan because I thought she could be really passive-aggressive and insincere at times.
Now, about the phone, you weren't positive whether or not Avery grabbed their phone again after storming off to the bathroom, correct?
I wasn't. Like I said, I guess I just assumed that she had.
And both Avery and yourself ditched school the day of Brackman's murder to look for it?
Yeah, we didn't have much going on, and I don't know. We just decided to, I guess.
So you have no real alibi other than each other, correct?
Well, I guess you could ask other people at the mall if they saw us.
But that evidence wasn't provided.
It wasn't, but I guess in court today, we are the only people who can, I guess, confirm each other's alibis, but I'm sure if you looked other places, you could find other people too.
Now, you say you found out about Brackman's murder along with everyone else?
I did.
And you talked about it with Avery and had no idea what to think?
Of course, I mean, we were shocked.
At the time, you guys had no theories?
No, not at all.
Now, you talked to Avery again after Avery's lawyer called you about being a witness, yes?
I did, yeah.
And only after talking to Avery again, you thought that Blair Rowlands could have been involved?
Well, I mean, it made sense to me, but I guess, yeah.
And you came to this conclusion after finding out that Rowlands was absent from school that day, correct?
I did. I mean, I was shocked. I mean, he had a story to go with it. I mean, Coach Brackman did put away his dad.
Now, you didn't mention your source for this information that Blair wasn't at school, correct?
I suppose I didn't. I guess I found out from Avery.
So you don't know that Blair Rowlands doesn't have an alibi?
I suppose I don't.
Meaning it's a possibility that Mr. Rowlands was accounted for despite not being at school?
It is a possibility, but Avery and I were accounted for too. We have solid alibis.
So even though both you and Avery were not at school that day either, you think that Rowlands is suspicious because he was not in attendance?
I think he could be, but I was with Avery the whole day. We were at the mall in the Fry Shack.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. So first, Ms. Perkins, do you think it's your job to decide what evidence surrounding Blair Rowlands was?
No, I'm not.
Objection. This question could be leading.
Overruled. You may answer the question.
No, I'm not an investigator. I'm just a witness in today's case.
Do you believe it's your job to provide evidence that Blair Rowlands wasn't at school?
No, I'm just a witness. I'm not an investigator.
So are you 100% sure that Avery Becker didn't commit this crime?
100%. I mean, she was with.
Objection. This question was asked and answered in their direct.
Sustained. Any further questions?
Yes, Your Honor. So, Ms. Becker or Ms. Perkins, are you aware that? So, Ms. Perkins, were you with Avery Becker that whole day, and can you account for her alibi?
I can.
Objection. This question was also asked and answered in the direct.
Sustained. Next question from the defense.
So, Ms. Perkins, can you account for Ms. Becker's alibi?
I can. I was with her the entire day. She didn't leave my side at all. And we were at the mall in the Fry Shack the whole day.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Does the defense have a third witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Avery Becker to the stand.
Okay. The court is going to take a 30-second recess, so you may call this witness, and we'll resume in about 30 seconds. Is the defense ready with their third witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Good morning. Please introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is Avery Becker.
Now, Ms. Becker, you're here today because you've been charged with murdering Mackenzie Brackman. Did you kill Mr. Brackman?
No, I didn't.
We're going to talk more about him in a moment. But Ms. Becker, what does your life look like now?
Well, right now, it's not the greatest, but I have a real hope for the future.
There was an objection to relevance. If the defense could repeat the question for the court.
Yes, Your Honor. I simply asked the defendant what their life looks like now to introduce themselves and their connection to today's case.
The objection at this time will be overruled, but this line of questioning should be brief. Thank you.
So, Ms. Becker, what does your life look like now?
Like I said, it's not the greatest, but I have a real hope for the future. You know, I can't wait to go to college and continue my mock trial journey. My ultimate goal is to be a mock trial coach.
Now, Ms. Perkins already briefly explained what mock trial is. Did you enjoy the activity?
I did, yes. It was probably my favorite extracurricular activity. It was the one thing that I was really good at. It came naturally to me.
Who was your coach?
Mr. Brackman, Coach Brackman, was my coach for all 4 years of high school.
What was your relationship like with Mr. Brackman?
It was tense. We didn't always agree on things involving mock trial. He had different opinions than I did, and sometimes that caused arguments.
All right, Ms. Becker, I want to talk about the day of the murder now, March 6th of 2020. Where were you?
Well, I wasn't at school. I had actually made the decision that day to skip school to go to the mall with my bestie, Taylor Perkins. We were looking for something.
What were you looking for?
My phone. It had gone missing the night before. I had it, and then when I woke up to check it the next morning, it was gone.
Were you able to find your phone?
Taylor called it several times, and we looked all over the mall and the Fry Shack, but we never found that phone.
Earlier, you mentioned that Mr. Brackman was your mock trial coach. Were you successful on his mock trial team?
I'd say I was pretty successful. You know, by the time I was a senior, I had made it to the A team, which is the top mock trial team. And I even won a couple of awards at our regional competition.
What awards did you win?
I won Best Attorney Award and Best Closing Argument.
And how did Mr. Brackman react after you won those awards?
Well, we were at practice a couple days after the competition, and he and I got into an argument about the awards.
What did he say?
Well, Mr. Brackman told me that I didn't deserve those awards. He told me that the judges at state would see right through them and that I only got them because of my good looks and charm, which it was odd of him to say that as a coach to me, a student. And after that argument, I didn't react well.
What did you do?
Well, I stormed out of the room and I grabbed what I thought was a dry erase marker on my way out. I took that marker and I wrote on Mr. Brackman's Porsche. I only found out later that it was permanent.
Did Mr. Brackman find out?
He did. He had followed me out into the parking lot and made the decision then and there to kick me off the mock trial team, which was a decision I understand now.
Did you try to apologize to Mr. Brackman?
Of course I did. I felt awful for what I had done, and even though his words hurt, I should not have reacted like that. So I went the very next day in person to apologize, but he didn't want to see me. His secretary wouldn't let me in.
Were you able to apologize to him?
I ended up texting him since I couldn't apologize face to face. So I texted him an apology, and I even offered to get a summer job just to help pay to repaint his car.
Why did you want to apologize to Mr. Brackman so much?
I knew that my actions were awful, regardless of why I did them. And I wanted him to know how sorry I was.
All right, Ms. Becker, I now want to talk about some other people involved in today's case. Did you hear Ms. Cifuentes testify earlier today?
I did.
Now, Ms. Cifuentes said you were, quote, pretty good friends. Were you pretty good friends with Ms. Cifuentes?
Honestly, not really. Alex likes to think that we're best friends, good friends, something like that, but I don't really consider myself a friend of Alex's. I guess it's just a difference of opinions.
Now, Ms. Cifuentes claims you asked her for help to get back on the mock trial team after you were kicked off. Did you ever write that?
No, I didn't. I wanted to earn Mr. Brackman's forgiveness before I tried to get back on the team.
Ms. Cifuentes also claims that you said you were going to break into Mr. Brackman's home. Did you write that?
No, I don't even know where Mr. Brackman lives.
Ms. Becker, did you see the Ring videos entered earlier today in trial?
Yes, I did.
Are you the person in the Ring video?
I'm not. I get that the person and I have a similar height and build, but a lot of people look like that and have that body stature.
Ms. Becker, were you at Mr. Brackman's home on March 6th of 2020?
No, I was at the mall all day with Taylor Perkins.
Ms. Becker, did you want to hurt Mr. Brackman?
No. In the days before his murder, I was still doing everything that I could to earn his forgiveness.
Thank you. No further questions at this time.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Becker, by your own statement, you and Brackman didn't get along, correct?
We did not. There was tension.
Brackman said you were lazy and didn't put in the work, right?
Yeah, he did say those things.
And he never gave you credit for anything you or Taylor Perkins did, correct?
He didn't frequently do that, and it bugged me.
And you said that Brackman hated you, yes?
Like I said, Mr. Brackman's relationship with me was not great.
Just to clarify, you said that he hated you.
He did not like me, no.
And you and Brackman argued at almost every practice, correct?
We certainly disagreed on a lot of things involving mock trial. Like I said, I was naturally good at it, so I chose to approach it extemporaneously and speak how I felt. He preferred for things to be written out and prepared.
And speaking of this disagreement, you had said Brackman wouldn't know a good cross if it hit him over the head, correct?
That is something I said.
And as this feud escalated, Brackman moved you down to the B team?
He did.
And you believe that the B team is full of losers?
I do believe that. I mean, they are the B team for a reason, and there was a reason that I was placed on the A team.
Taylor Perkins is your best bud, correct?
Yeah, Taylor and I are like super close.
And she gave up her senior season of mock trial so you could get back on the team, correct?
She did do that. I didn't ask her to, but she's just such a good friend.
And then after being put back on the B team, you won the Best Attorney Award and Best Closer at Regionals, right?
Well, not on the B team. I was on the A team, but I did win those awards. I was really proud of them.
Yes, and despite this, instead of congratulating you as expected, Brackman criticized you for going off script.
He did. We got into an argument at the practice after the competition. And like I said, my reaction to that argument was horrible, and I should have never done what I did.
During this reaction, you called him the worst coach in the state, right?
Yes, I did.
And you wrote Worst Attorney Award in giant letters on the hood of Brackman's Porsche in permanent marker, correct?
I did do that. I 100% thought that it was dry erase and that it would just come off. But when I found out that it was permanent, I was so ashamed of myself.
And despite being ashamed, you vowed that you'd get back at him if it was the last thing you did, correct?
Those were words that I said, but I never meant them.
But you never apologized to Mr. Brackman in person, right?
Like I said, he didn't want to see me. I made every effort possible to apologize face to face, prove to him that I was sorry, but texting was the next best thing.
Okay, now on the day of the murder, you were not at school, correct?
No, I wasn't.
And you and Taylor were together during this time?
We were looking for my phone.
And your best friend Taylor Perkins is the only person who can testify to where you were on the day of the murder?
Well, sure, she's the only person here, but we saw lots of people at the mall.
But Taylor Perkins is the only person here who can testify to where you were on the day of the murder, correct?
That's correct.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. All right, Ms. Becker, you were asked about some things that you said to Mr. Brackman in your high school years on cross-examination. In retrospect, did any of Mr. Brackman's advice to you and criticisms have any merit?
You know, even though we disagreed frequently, now that I think about it, a lot of his advice was good advice. I may not have appreciated it then, but I realize that now.
Objection, Your Honor. Unfair extrapolation.
Okay, and any response from the defense?
Your Honor, Ms. Becker is just talking about her opinion now after being in high school.
Okay. Does the prosecution have an objection based in the rules of evidence?
Yes, relevance.
Okay, and what's the defense's response to the relevance objection?
Yes, Your Honor, this is relevant because it goes to Avery Becker's lack of motive.
Okay. The defense may continue. The objection will be overruled at this time.
All right, you were also asked if you said, I would get back at Mr. Brackman if it's the last thing I ever did on cross. When did you say that?
I said that to my mom after coming home from being kicked off the team. And even though I did say that, they were never words that I meant.
So just to clarify, did you actually mean you were going to get back at Mr. Brackman if it's the last thing you ever did?
No, I didn't.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Does the defense have any further witnesses?
No, Your Honor, at this point in time, the defense rests.
Thank you. I think we're ready for closing arguments. Does the prosecution have a closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Factual feud or fabricated fiction. Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. Today, you have heard the story of a long simmering feud that was met with a tragic end. On the night of March 6th, 2020, Mackenzie Brackman, an amazing mock trial coach who loved helping his students and dedicated himself to supporting them, died from his stab wound just inches away from his front door. In presenting the prosecution's fact-based case against Avery Becker, you heard from 3 witnesses on their accounts of the crime. First, you heard from Detective Markowitz, a long-standing officer with multiple years of experience as a detective and countless hours of training. He described for us the bloody scene he found on patrol the night of March 6th. He then placed Avery Becker at the scene of the crime through cell phone records. Then you heard from Alex Cifuentes. Alex described a long simmering feud between Brackman and Becker. She recounted the anger Avery displayed after being demoted to the B team, her sly move to get back onto the A team, and the outburst which ultimately got her kicked off of the mock trial team altogether. Finally, you heard from crime scene reconstruction expert Kyle Kuzak. In their expert testimony, Kuzak outlined his reconstruction of the case based on an exhaustive investigation. This reconstruction accounts for all evidence present at the crime scene and establishes a clear picture of what took place the night of the murder. Together, these testimonies tell the story of a factual feud gone terribly, terribly wrong. In the face of this factual feud, the defense has concocted a fabricated fiction, seeking to undermine the truth of this open and shut case. The defense claims that in our prosecution of this case, we reached an easy conclusion. They claim that Avery Becker had a rock-solid alibi, that our expert investigators used unforgivably faulty evidence, and that there is another lead in this case that our expert investigators with years of experience simply failed to pursue. These frivolous attempts to undermine truth do not stand up to the testimony provided here today. To begin, Becker's rock-solid alibi is supported by only one person, Taylor Perkins, the same best friend who gave up her senior season of mock trial to help Avery out of a jam just weeks earlier. There's also no physical evidence supporting this alibi. Next, the defense claims our case relies on faulty evidence, but the experts have spoken. Crime scene reconstruction expert Kyle Kuzak stated that there was more than enough evidence to come to a concrete conclusion. Moreover, the defense's fiction has blatant holes in it, from an investigator that never set foot on the crime scene to 2 best friends who have proven their support for one another has no bounds. Finally, the defense points to a lead that our prosecution allegedly failed to thoroughly investigate. But our experts conducted exhaustive investigations and followed every lead. The defense has provided no evidence for their alternative theories. The fact behind this feud is that Avery Becker's relationship with Brackman weighed heavily on her. She claimed that she would get back at Brackman if it was the last thing she did, and that was no empty threat. She sent texts to Alex Cifuentes laying out her plan to trash Mr. Brackman's house. And finally, on the day of the murder, Avery Becker skipped school and was tracked driving to and arriving at Brackman's house at the same time he was murdered. Now, the good people of the jury, it's your turn to decide for yourself which should stand up in a court of law. A factual feud or fabricated fiction. I urge you to find Avery Becker guilty of both charges.
Thank you. Would the defense like to deliver a closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor, but before I begin, I forgot to mention after my cross-examination of Detective Jordan Markowitz, I took a screenshot of my Zoom annotations on Exhibit 15. During my closing, would it be all right if my co-counsel screen shared that screenshot for purposes of argument?
Yes, that is all right.
Thank you, Your Honor. The easy conclusion. Mr. Nash just got up here and told you that today's case is about the prosecution's facts versus the defense's fiction. Members of the jury, let me remind you, the defense had no burden today. We didn't have to prove or provide any facts to you. We only had to show that in the prosecution's case, there is a reasonable doubt. The prosecution had to prove to you the facts beyond a reasonable doubt. We didn't. They weren't able to do that anyways. Because when you choose the easy conclusion, you tend to miss a lot of key details along the way. Today you heard from both Avery Becker and her good friend Taylor Perkins, who both told you she was nowhere near Mr. Brackman's home the day of the murder. Now, the prosecution tried to bring in call detail records or CDRs to prove that Avery Becker's phone was at Mr. Brackman's residence. However, as you heard from Detective Markowitz himself today, these call detail records can't accurately tell us exactly where Miss Becker's phone was. They don't act as a GPS, and her phone could have been anywhere within the range of that bottom cell tower. And even if they were conclusive, it wouldn't matter. Avery Becker lost her phone on March 5th, a whole day before the murders even took place. Avery Becker was at the mall the day of the murder with Taylor Perkins. Professor Von Owens looked into Taylor Perkins' call detail records and found that connections with her phone were made at the antenna that covered the mall, consistent with her alibi. Detective Markowitz didn't bother to check Taylor Perkins' call detail records, didn't bother to check the alibi of his primary suspect. The prosecution's investigation was also full of errors. For instance, Exhibit 14, those text messages, are a key piece of evidence for the prosecution. However, Detective Markowitz didn't use the training he had in the Celebrite system to download these text messages off of Ms. Cifuentes' phone. Instead, he trusted screenshots that could have easily been doctored, messages that Ms. Becker denies ever even writing. Again, Detective Markowitz chose the easy conclusion. And lastly, you heard about an alternate suspect, Blair Rollins, completely ignored by the prosecution. Blair Rollins' father, Jonathan Rollins, was sentenced to life in prison, and his attorney was Mr. Brackman. We showed you Exhibit 22, where Jonathan Rollins screams, "I'll get you back, Brackman, if it's the last thing I do." Blair Rollins was in the courtroom when his father said those words. Blair Rollins wasn't at school the day of the murder. Blair Rollins is the same height and build as the murderer, and now Blair Rollins is nowhere to be found, and the police have done nothing to try and find him. The prosecution is actively choosing the easy conclusion. So we have an ignored alibi, an investigation reliant on assumptions and errors, and an ignored alternate suspect. What does that mean for you, members of the jury, and the decision you should be making at the end of today's trial? Well, the prosecution carries the burden of proof. They had to prove to you that on the 6th of March of 2020, Avery Becker unlawfully trespassed on Mr. Brackman's property and caused his death while unlawfully on his property. They had to prove both of those things to you beyond a reasonable doubt. Members of the jury, beyond a reasonable doubt is the highest burden in our criminal justice system. So if you question why Detective Markowitz didn't bother to check the alibi of his primary suspect, that's reasonable doubt. If He found it odd that Detective Markowitz chose to trust a piece of evidence that could have easily been altered with. That's reasonable doubt. He thought it was weird that the prosecution failed to look into a key alternate suspect. Members of the jury, that is reasonable doubt. The prosecution presented you with the easy conclusion today. We're asking you to make the right one. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebuttal, closing argument from the prosecution?
Yes, Your Honor. As the prosecution, we have the burden of proof in this case, and that is exactly what we have given you. Today, you've heard from experts at the top of their field, using all evidence provided and pursuing all suspects. If that constitutes an easy conclusion, then I don't know what facts would stand up in this courtroom. I urge the jury to side with the prosecution in the facts of this case and find the defendant, Avery Becker, guilty.
Thank you, everybody. I think that wraps up the competition. I think that we'll just give our scoring judges about a minute to finalize their score sheets and then click send. And once they're submitted from both of the scoring judges, perhaps the scoring judges can stay on and give a minute or two of constructive feedback. So if the two scoring judges would just speak up or type in the chat once you've submitted your score sheets, then we'll move on to that phase of the competition. And well done, everybody.
Could I have everybody put on their video real quick, just for a final, so I can see faces with names? Thank you. Appreciate that.